Welcome to the 3 best opening traps in the Scandinavian Defense, an opening that begins after black responds with pawn to d5 against white's king's pawn. In most games, white captures the pawn on d5, and this position is extremely common at the amateur level. The Scandinavian often gets a poor reputation because beginners are taught that it is bad for black, mainly because black usually has to recapture with the queen, allowing white to develop with tempo by attacking that queen. But here is a simple and powerful idea many players overlook. Let's roll the position back. Instead of immediately taking the pawn with the queen, black plays knight to f6 first. Only after that move does black recapture the pawn with the knight, meaning the queen never has to step out early at all. This avoids the usual tempo loss issues and transforms the Scandinavian into a very solid, flexible defense. From here, you will see different approaches from white. Some players try to hold the extra pawn with pawn to c4. Others develop naturally with knight to c3, and stronger players advance with pawn to d4, which is considered the most principled continuation. Each of these paths allows black various tactical opportunities, and that's where the traps begin. Now let's talk about all 3 of white's main options, because we have hidden traps prepared for each of them. If white plays pawn to d4, which is considered the strongest and most principled continuation, black has a very interesting and provocative line. Black captures the pawn on d4, and after white replies with pawn to c4, it looks like white is building a powerful center while also chasing away the knight. Here black plays knight to b4, a deliberately provocative move. At first glance, this looks terrible for black because white appears to have a double attack with queen to a forecheck, seemingly winning the knight. Black calmly responds with knight to c6, defending the knight on b4. But many white players still think they can win material thanks to the pin, so they play pawn to d5, targeting the knight on c6. It looks completely lost for black, but here comes the trap. Black strikes back with pawn to b5, an extremely powerful move. This is a marvelous tactical idea, and you will be surprised how often you can reach this exact position in practical games. White can capture the pawn either with the pawn or with the queen. Both moves fall into tactical trouble. Let's say white wants to maintain the pin and captures with queen takes b5. The moment white moves the queen, the c2 square becomes undefended. That allows black to leap in with knight to c2, forking the king and the rook and winning material immediately. After knight to c2, the king must move. When the king steps toward the knight to attack it, black plays an unexpected move, bishop to d7. Black does not immediately capture the rook, because doing so would allow white to reply with a checking move and generate counterplay. Instead, bishop to d7 quietly builds a deadly attack. What can white do? Capturing the knight on c2 fails immediately because black has a simple fork, and the discovered attack on the queen makes the position hopeless. If white instead plays pawn takes c6, black changes plans and strikes with bishop to g4. This move delivers a double check from both the bishop and the queen, so white is forced to move the king. White can temporarily capture the knight, but black immediately hits back with queen to d1 check, pulling the king into the open. The king's only square is king to c3, after which black grabs the bishop with check. White is essentially lost. If the king continues running, black easily joins the attack with the rook, but usually white tries to run toward the queen side. From there, black finishes the game in style. After the king steps toward b3, black plays bishop to d1 check, forcing king to a 3, and then delivers the final blow with pawn to e5. It is a beautiful finishing move, strong on move 1, and even stronger as the last move of the game. With the other bishop covering the long diagonal, pawn to a5 becomes a near checkmate, and white's king has nowhere left to go. After pawn to a5, the checkmate is only a few moves away. White must somehow shield the king, but every attempt collapses. If white tries pawn to c5, black simply captures it and renews the check. White cannot push the b-pawn because it is pinned. Eventually, white is forced to give up the queen, and after queen check, pawn to b4, black calmly returns with queen to c1, delivering a rare and beautiful checkmate from white's own back rank. It is a stunning trap. Your opponents will absolutely tilt after falling for it, all because of that early pawn to b5. Now we know queen takes b5 loses. But what if white plays pawn takes b5 instead? Black continues with knight to d4, using a similar theme. White cannot capture the knight because of the royal fork, which would win the queen. If white avoids capturing, black still threatens the fork on c2, attacking the king and rook, so white must respond. If white plays knight to a 3, trying to cover c2, black simply plays pawn to a5, strengthening the knight on b4 and building a very active position. Both black knights dominate the board, restricting white's development. Usually white tries bishop to d2, attempting to chase away the knight on b4. Black pretends to blunder and plays pawn takes d5, inviting white to capture the knight. White happily does so, but black is fully prepared. After the knight on b4 is captured, black unleashes the key resource, queen to e4 check. This is the tactical point. Placing the queen on the fourth rank sets up the final blow. After white blocks the check, black finally captures on b4 with check. White takes the knight and feels satisfied, believing they are a piece ahead. But this is exactly where the trap springs open. The queen on e4 is x-raying white's queen, and black unleashes the decisive discovered attack with knight to f3 check. White is forced to capture the knight, and now black simply takes the queen. Not only does black win the queen, black continues attacking. Moves like knight to c3 are met by queen takes b2, attacking both the rook and key squares around the king. Black picks up even more material and converts the game easily. Let's return to the opening position. After pawn takes d5, aside from the modern plan of developing with knight to f6, followed by knight takes d5, many players still stick to the classical choice. Queen takes d5. The usual response for white is knight to c3, immediately challenging the queen, but some players take a different path, choosing pawn to d4 instead. After black replies with knight to f6, white often continues with pawn to c4, trying to chase the queen with tempo while expanding into a broad, powerful pawn center. Here black has another surprising idea. White expects the queen to retreat, maybe to d8 or a 5, but instead black plays queen to a4, boldly keeping the queen in the center. It looks like white will gain more tempo attacking the queen, but strangely, this move is completely sound. In fact, queen to e4 is the strongest move in the position, confirmed by Stockfish, and tactically everything works perfectly for black. At this point, white needs to bring some cover to the king. The most natural-looking move, bishop to b2, actually collapses on closer inspection because it leaves the g2 pawn hanging. That's why most players opt for the more secure bishop to e3, reinforcing the center and guarding key squares. Black doesn't wait around. With pawn to e5, black challenges white's central structure and clears the long diagonal so the f8 bishop can enter the game aggressively, often with tempo-gaining checks. If white tries knight to c3 to attack the queen, black calmly develops with bishop to b4, keeping the queen active and making it difficult for white to drive it away. White still cannot play bishop to d3 because the pawn on g2 would hang and the rook would be exposed. Pawn to f3 is also a losing blunder, since black would simply capture the bishop on e3. So white finds another idea. The knight is attacking black's queen, and the only defender is the bishop on b4. White tries to remove it with queen to a4, creating a double attack. Black answers with knight to c6. White then thinks, the knight is pinned, I can win it with pawn to d5. But once again, black uses the same tactical theme from the previous trap. Black simply captures with pawn takes d5. Since the knight cannot move due to the pin, white must capture back with pawn takes d5, believing they're winning a piece. Instead, black hits with the devastating in-between move, bishop takes c3 check, opening a discovered attack along the fourth rank. This pattern is rare in most openings, but it appears surprisingly often in the Scandinavian. On the next move, black takes white's queen, reaching a completely winning position. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.